It didn't begin with a royal announcement. It began with silence, the kind of silence that terrifies palace insiders more than any screaming headline ever could. And according to whispers exploding through royal corridors, that silence carried one brutal message. King Charles III had allegedly decided the monarchy could no longer afford to protect Meghan Markle at all. Behind closed palace walls, a sealed memorandum reportedly circulated through Clarence House after midnight, and by sunrise, panic was already spreading through royal administrative circles. Not public panic, palace panic, the kind that happens when aides suddenly stop leaking, when senior correspondents receive no guidance, and when officials who normally calm speculation become completely unreachable. That alone sent shockwaves through Westminster because veteran royal watchers know one chilling truth better than anyone else. When the palace goes completely silent, something enormous is happening behind the scenes. According to insiders, the document allegedly outlined a devastating restructuring connected to future sovereign grant protections and institutional royal funding. On paper, the wording reportedly looked technical, cold, bureaucratic, but insiders claim the meaning underneath those phrases was explosive. Meghan Markle was allegedly being cut off from every future institutional privilege connected to the crown itself, not temporarily, permanently. And inside Buckingham Palace, many allegedly interpreted it as financial exile disguised as administrative policy. What made this situation feel even darker was the timing. King Charles III had already been facing mounting health concerns, and power inside the monarchy was quietly shifting toward Prince William and Princess Anne. According to royal insiders, private strategy meetings reportedly became colder over recent months. The conversations allegedly stopped being about family tensions and started becoming about institutional survival. That is where everything changed. Because once the monarchy starts viewing something as a threat to survival, emotion disappears from the equation. Insiders whisper that senior royals allegedly became deeply alarmed over what they viewed as a dangerous blurring between royal identity and celebrity independence surrounding the Sussex operation in California. As to the public, it looked like media deals, interviews, documentaries, and branding. But to the old guard inside Buckingham Palace, it reportedly looked like something far more dangerous: royal symbolism operating outside royal control. And then came the phrase that reportedly echoed through palace meetings like a warning siren: the sacred architecture of the crown. That phrase terrified insiders because within royal culture, the sovereign grant is not viewed as ordinary money. It represents legitimacy, duty, continuity, loyalty to the institution above personal ambition, which means removing someone from future access to it carries a symbolic message far beyond finances. According to palace whispers, some insiders allegedly viewed the move as a deliberate warning to anyone tempted to use royal status as independent leverage. And then suddenly, one name reportedly began surfacing behind nearly every major internal discussion: Princess Anne. Palace veterans allegedly described Anne as the monarchy's ultimate institutional enforcer. Never emotional, never distracted by headlines, just discipline, structure, and ruthless loyalty to the crown. According to sources familiar with palace operations, Anne reportedly pushed for what insiders described as future-proofing measures designed to shield the monarchy from reputational vulnerability for decades to come. But insiders claim the bigger shift happened with Prince William. Royal commentators allegedly noticed William becoming increasingly uncompromising behind closed doors, publicly restrained, privately hardened. And according to whispers emerging from palace circles, one brutal philosophy allegedly began dominating discussions surrounding the future monarchy: the firm before the family. That sentence changed everything. Because once the institution places survival above blood, every relationship inside the palace becomes conditional. Suddenly, the monarchy reportedly stopped asking whether reconciliation was emotionally possible and started asking whether reconciliation was institutionally dangerous. That distinction created a terrifying shift inside Buckingham Palace. Conversations allegedly became colder. Legal reviews intensified. Funding structures were quietly examined. Invitations allegedly changed. Language reportedly became more formal. And according to insiders, Meghan's future role inside the monarchy slowly began disappearing piece by piece through quiet administrative restructuring. Then came the moment insiders claim shattered whatever hesitation remained inside Clarence House. A private dispute allegedly connected to future branding rights and commercial positioning reportedly triggered panic at the highest levels of the monarchy. Different accounts vary in detail, but they all point toward the same explosive fear: who controls the value of royal identity once someone leaves the institution itself? That question reportedly haunted palace strategists. Because inside royal culture, titles are not viewed as personal assets. They are tied to hierarchy, duty, and constitutional responsibility. Yet, according to insiders, insiders, palace advisors allegedly feared royal symbolism was increasingly being pulled into celebrity culture, commercial negotiations, streaming projects, interviews, and global branding campaigns beyond palace authority. And once those fears intensified, the atmosphere reportedly became brutal. Some royal correspondents even began quietly drawing comparisons to the constitutional anxieties surrounding abdication crisis of 1936. That comparison alone carried chilling implications because historically, the monarchy fears only one thing more than scandal: losing control over one of its own. Meanwhile, insiders claim King Charles III himself became increasingly isolated inside his own reign. Reports suggest Charles allegedly struggled emotionally with the escalating divide between the palace and his younger son, Prince Harry. Those close to Clarence House claim the king repeatedly hoped silence and distance might eventually cool tensions. But according to palace whispers, by the time branding disputes exploded internally, trust inside the institution had already fractured beyond repair. The terrifying part, according to palace insiders, was that the monarchy allegedly no longer viewed the Sussex crisis as temporary. It had reportedly evolved into something permanent, structural, almost constitutional in nature. By the time whispers surrounding Meghan's exclusion from future sovereign grant structures began spreading through royal administrative circles, insiders claim Buckingham Palace had already emotionally crossed a line that may never be uncrossed again. And then came the reaction from California. According to reports emerging from palace-adjacent sources, Prince Harry allegedly reacted with absolute fury once details of the financial restructuring reached him. Not frustration, fury. Because insiders claim Harry reportedly viewed the decision not as a technical adjustment, but as a calculated attempt to erase both him and Meghan Markle from the institutional future of the monarchy entirely. And honestly, that is where the emotional devastation inside this story becomes impossible to ignore. For years, tensions had already exploded through interviews, documentaries, memoirs, public accusations, royal silence, strategic leaks, and carefully managed statements. But according to insiders, this felt different because it allegedly carried the emotional finality of Exile. Palace veterans whisper that once discussions about future sovereign grant exclusion entered serious internal circulation, Harry's relationship with senior palace figures reportedly entered what one insider described as irreversible territory. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, the emotional realities unfolding across the Atlantic reportedly collided with a much harsher institutional philosophy taking hold among the old guard. According to royal correspondents, figures surrounding Prince William and Princess Anne increasingly viewed the monarchy itself as symbolically under siege. Every interview allegedly became another crack in the foundation. Every commercial project reportedly became another risk to institutional neutrality. Every public dispute was interpreted not as personal drama, but as reputational warfare threatening the sacred stability of the crown itself. And the colder the palace became, the more emotionally isolated the Sussexes reportedly felt. Sources close to Meghan allegedly claim she viewed the financial exclusion as a deliberate rejection designed to reinforce her outsider status within royal history forever. Supporters of the Duchess argued the monarchy was refusing to adapt to modern realities. Critics inside palace circles allegedly argued the Sussex strategy repeatedly crossed institutional boundaries that could no longer be tolerated. And that is why reconciliation reportedly became almost impossible, because both sides increasingly viewed themselves as the victims, one side fighting for independence, the other fighting for survival. At the center of the emotional disaster stood King Charles III, trapped between monarchy and fatherhood. Reports suggest Charles remained deeply conflicted as palace factions hardened around him. On one side stood William and Anne, reportedly demanding stronger institutional discipline regardless of emotional consequences. On the other stood Harry, still connected to Charles through blood, grief, memory, and decades of shared royal history despite years of public fracture. Royal commentators began describing Charles as a sovereign trapped between two unbearable realities, protecting the crown or protecting his son. But according to insiders, the momentum inside the institution had already shifted beyond reconciliation. Palace veterans allegedly started repeating one phrase more openly than ever before: the firm before the family. And that sentence reportedly became the chilling blueprint shaping the monarchy's transformation into a colder, stricter, more disciplined institution. Royal correspondents soon began discussing the possibility of a permanent fracture inside the House of of Windsor itself. Comparisons to earlier royal estrangements resurfaced throughout British media circles, but many observers argue this crisis felt uniquely dangerous because it unfolded in the era of celebrity branding, global media warfare, and non-stop public scrutiny where every silence becomes symbolic and every absence becomes political. And beneath all of it, according to Palace Whispers, trust had collapsed. Not tension, not disagreement, collapse. The tragedy reportedly haunted even some insiders who supported the crackdown, because underneath the constitutional language and administrative restructuring remained something painfully human: a father and son drifting further apart with every passing month while the monarchy hardened around them like stone. By this stage, the palace allegedly stopped focusing on healing the divide and started focusing entirely on reinforcing institutional boundaries through consequences severe enough to send a message across the entire royal orbit. According to insiders, Meghan's removal from future sovereign grant benefits was no longer viewed internally as just policy. It became symbolic doctrine, a warning that royal privilege without royal duty would no longer survive under the future monarchy taking shape around William and Anne. That is when palace observers reportedly began noticing something deeply unsettling. The monarchy itself was changing. According to whispers from royal administrative streams, the crown was allegedly becoming leaner, colder, and far less tolerant of ambiguity. Flexibility reportedly stopped being viewed as strength. It became vulnerability. And insiders now claim the institution quietly reached a terrifying conclusion after years of turmoil. Survival required firmer walls, stricter expectations, and ruthless clarity regarding who belonged fully inside the monarchy and who did not. The deeper this crisis unfolded, the more one haunting presence reportedly continued hanging over Buckingham Palace itself: Elizabeth II. Palace veterans began whispering that many of the safeguards allegedly activated against Meghan were not improvised by Charles at all, but rooted in quiet contingency frameworks established years earlier during the late Queen's reign. If true, the implications are chilling, because it would mean the monarchy did not create its response under pressure. It simply activated systems already waiting silently beneath palace operations for years. Reports suggest institutional mechanisms tied to titles, funding, duties, ceremonial associations, and structural boundaries were allegedly reviewed repeatedly during Elizabeth's final decade on the throne. Officially, those frameworks existed to preserve constitutional stability during transitions. But insiders now whisper that some of those same structures allegedly formed the backbone of the measures later used against Meghan and Harry after their royal departure. And according to palace insiders, William has reportedly embraced that philosophy completely. Royal commentators increasingly describe the future king as the architect of a far stricter monarchy centered around loyalty, discipline, institutional clarity, and tightly controlled royal symbolism. In this vision, half and half out arrangements allegedly become impossible. Ambiguity becomes liability, and royal identity becomes something guarded with extraordinary force rather than loosely shared across celebrity culture and commercial influence. At the same time, insiders claim Princess Anne reached near mythical status among sections of the old guard during the crisis. Some palace aides allegedly began referring to her privately as the guardian of the flame, the royal most determined to preserve the monarchy's traditional foundations during one of the most unstable periods in generations. According to whispers from administrative circles, Anne reportedly never viewed the conflict as emotional. To her, it was procedural, institutional, necessary, and perhaps that is the most chilling part of all. Because according to palace veterans, exile inside royal history rarely arrives through dramatic confrontations. It comes quietly through revoked privileges, vanished invitations, colder language, unanswered calls, and silence heavy enough to echo through palace corridors for years. And insiders now claim that silence is exactly what surrounds Meghan Markle's future relationship with the crown. For all the public interviews, memoirs, accusations, and headlines, royal insiders whisper that the true ending allegedly came not through open war, but through distance. A slow administrative unraveling until almost nothing remained except memory, symbolism, and the shadow of what once existed between the Sussexes and the monarchy. And yet the emotional damage reportedly continues haunting the House of Windsor itself.